This is the Week on Word, a podcast featuring a roundup of the most interesting, informative, and entertaining interviews from Word Radio. You can listen to WURD Radio anytime, anywhere on WURDradio.com and the Word Radio app. Give us a play and download it today. In this episode, Piphus, a four-time Emmy-winning producer and nationally recognized ventriloquist, stopped by the Midday Break Room with Tiffany Bacon, known for her role as Gabrielle on Sesame Street since 2020. Piphus shared her journey into ventriloquism, what it means to be the first full-time Black female puppeteer on Sesame Street, and the details about her new album, Cinderella Sweep. And Dr. Etta Fields Black, professor and director at Carnegie Mellon's Dietrich College of Humanities and Social Sciences, appeared on Evening Words to discuss her research into the transnational history of West African rice farmers. But first, Pennsylvania State Representative Malcolm Kenyatta, who serves the 181st District, joined Wake Up With WURD with Solomon Jones to break down what he calls the Trump mega bill.
Joining us now is DNC Vice Chairman Malcolm Kenyatta. Joins us to talk about where the Democratic Party is. And after what happened this weekend, Representative Kenyatta, we got a lot to talk about. How you doing this morning?
I'm doing good. How you doing, Solomon?
I am doing fine. I am concerned about what is happening with the United States and Iran. Where's the Democratic Party on this?
The Democratic Party is, we don't need another damn war. Let me say a number of things. First and foremost, there are a lot of people who are listening right now, Solomon, who maybe have served or who have loved ones who serve. And if you or the people you love best have the courage to serve this country, even when it doesn't always love you back, and go to some far-flung part of the world to defend this nation, then you know what? Congress has at least a moral responsibility to vote to send you there. And the president does not have the authority to just send us into another war without any consultation from Congress, and to also send us into a war without having a cohesive reason for us being there and a cohesive plan for what happens next. And I'm going to say something that folks can go Google. You may have never even thought about this or heard about this. But there's a tiny little waterway called the Strait of Hormuz, where it's in between Oman and Iran. 25% of the world's oil moves through that waterway. Iran has just said yesterday that they are going to block that waterway. If they do that, even the threat of them doing it has sent oil prices and thus your gas prices through the roof. But if they actually do that, whether it's for a day, for a week, for a month, at the height of summer, you are going to see one of the largest increases in gas prices that we've ever seen. And so we have a president that does not follow the facts, somebody who does not have the discipline, the foresight, the wisdom to lead us in this moment. And he certainly doesn't have the right to send us off into war without any consultation from Congress. What he's doing is unconstitutional. And if members of Congress had any guts, they would be making sure that they're standing up to this president, demanding that he abide by the Constitution, and impeaching somebody who constantly breaks the law.
So we know that Republicans are in the majority, so they're not going to bring articles of impeachment up for a vote, but doesn't stop the Democrats from proposing that. But beyond that, what concrete actions can the Democrats take in Congress, given that they're not in the majority?
So Thomas Massey, who is a Republican from Kentucky, and a conservative, but with us on this issue, prior to Trump launching these strikes, he introduced a War Powers Act in Congress. And what does that do? That allows Congress to either say, yeah, you can move forward and we formally declare war, or tells the administration that they cannot move forward. And that is being supported in a bipartisan way, including by some Democratic members of Congress, here in the state of Pennsylvania. I think there's 52 co-sponsors at this point. That is something concrete that could be done to rein in this president in this moment. And as I said, it has bipartisan, support. But let this point not get lost, because I get that the average person is not, following every single aspect of this, but does understand that we don't need to be embroiled in another endless war in the Middle East. But we can be clear on multiple things at one time. Iran, just go and look at it, do some research on it. Iran is a brutal government and regime that oppresses its people, is horrific, and just yesterday has made it clear that any American citizen, even if they're a non-combatant, is fair game in their view. And I think, a super majority of the American people, including folks listening right now, don't think that they need a nuclear weapon. But that's why what President Obama did with achieving the Iran nuclear deal was the diplomatic path to stopping them from acquiring nuclear weapons. It was one of the most important diplomatic victories of the 21st century. We should be just honest about this. Donald Trump ripped it up because he hated President Obama and did not want this black man to have this incredible diplomatic victory. You've heard Trump talk over and over again about how upset he was that Obama got a Nobel Peace Prize and how he deserves a Nobel Peace Prize. Yeah. And so he tore up the Iran deal, even when Iran was in compliance, setting the groundwork for the very situation that we find ourselves in. And I believe it was at the Leacourt Center where Vice President Harris said that if Donald Trump is elected, that we would be in war in 6 months. She was right to the day. She was right to the day. And I just want to say, moving forward, trust black women, listen to black women. And we had a nominee who knew what the hell she was talking about. And sadly, everything that she predicted, from Donald Trump using troops against the American people, talking about his corruption and talking about him wanting to get us embroiled in another war, was exactly what happened. And I'll make this final point, Solomon. You look at a lot of polling, and one of the reasons young men in particular supported Donald Trump is they believed him when he lied that he would end these endless wars. Yeah. And yet Donald Trump has got us in another war, and not even, just over 6 months.
I think the thing that I'm concerned about is what happens if the United States has to engage in a ground war. I'm sure that you've seen the reports that say experts looked at what happened with one site in particular where this enriched uranium was supposed to be stored, and said that there was surface damage, but they're not sure that the damage went down to the point where that enriched uranium was stored. And so what happens if ground troops have to go in? Yep. Is that something that's being discussed among Democrats?
So, what makes this, every aspect of this, when you peel back the layer of the onion, it's stinkier and it's worse. Okay, because the justification for this strike was that we needed to stop Iran's, nuclear program, even though our own government, Trump's own intelligence agencies have made clear that Iran was obviously interested in enriching uranium, but had not made a decision on whether or not to move forward with the nuclear weapon. And Trump himself was engaged in diplomatic negotiations to try to restart some version of the Iran deal. The New York Times, in addition to the surface damage that you mentioned at Fordo, which is the nuclear site that you referenced, in addition to only surface damage, Iran has made it clear, and our intelligence has backed up, that they moved the nuclear material that they had at that site prior to the strike. So Donald Trump went on TV and said that we fully destroyed these nuclear sites. Right. That was a lie. He went on TV and said we fully ended their nuclear program. That was a lie. Donald Trump warned them that we were going to attack before we attacked. All of us know that, if you're going to fight somebody and we say on site, it's on site. You don't say, Solomon, I'm going to meet you at 3:00, be there, and then I'm going to hit you with a left jab first. That's exactly what he did. And so not only did he create a situation where we're now embroiled in a war, but he didn't even stop the nuclear program after he went on TV and pretended that he did. So I think right now the good news is that, all of the intelligence agencies who've looked at this so far, and including the International Atomic Energy Agency, have said that they have not seen any nuclear sort of radioactive material that came out because of these strikes, which is good. But the hope is right now that we do not send in any ground troops. And I would hope that Congress would come to a complete halt if this president tries to move beyond, bombing runs to actually sending American troops and embroil us, directly on the ground in another war. I hope that does not happen. But we should be clear. We have a number of, 40,000 plus troops in the Middle East right now in a variety of different roles, not combat roles, who are there right now, who are at great risk.
We are talking with State Representative Malcolm Kenyatta. He is the vice chair of the Democratic National Committee. And we're talking about what's happening in Iran and what are the implications for people back here in America. Now, that Strait of Hormuz, of course, as you correctly stated, is a place where a lot of the world's oil has to go through there in ships, Iran threatening to shut that down. What could we see in terms of the immediate effect on oil prices here in America?
So overnight, we already saw oil prices going up. The last I checked, I think we were closing in on $90, a barrel. And the average oil price, last I checked on this as well. And I'm sorry, guys, I'm a nerd who checks on stuff like this. The average gas prices across the country right now is at $3.89. I don't think it's inconceivable that you could see gas prices as high nationally as $5, a gallon, just off of the threat of this alone in the coming weeks. But if they actually close it, this is something Iran has threatened over the years, and even the threat has sent oil prices and oil futures through the roof. But if they were actually to close it, even for a day, we could see oil prices and gas prices, beyond that, go up to levels that we've never seen. And I think even for me to pontificate, I could be incorrect about how high they could go. And that is a powerful piece of leverage that Iran has, particularly going into the heaviest travel season, for families. And you have people, you hear me talk about it all the time. Our job is to make life better for folks. I told you, that's the Democratic Party's 3-word mission and our 3-word simple message: make life better. You have people who've saved up all year to take their kids on that one trip to Six Flags or to drive to, the beach or whatever they're going to do. And it's not a small deal if your gas prices go from, $3.10, which we're seeing in our region as an average gas price, up to $4 or $5. We know the impact of that. And just this past month, grocery prices have been the highest that they've been in the last 10 years. And I know the corporate media doesn't want to talk about grocery prices anymore, and they think that we've all forgotten about it. But, every time you go to the grocery store, we're feeling the pinch. And so I say all that to say everything Donald Trump said, even if you were somebody who said, you know what, Malcolm, Democrats didn't do what they said they're going to do, let's give this guy a chance. Everything he said was a lie. He has not worked to lower grocery prices. They're going to cut Medicare and Medicaid by up to 14 million people, kicking them off their health care. I know we talked about this last time, but you might be saying, hey, Malcolm, I don't have Medicare and Medicaid. I get insurance through my job. The Insurance Federation has made clear if this plan moves forward to cut Medicare and Medicaid, thereby lowering the amount of people who have access to preventative care and primary care. If you have private insurance, on average, your premiums are going to go up 16%. Now, maybe somebody listening can afford a 16% increase in their healthcare prices. I know I damn sure cannot afford a 16% increase. That's going to be a problem. And then finally, the massive cut to food stamps, primarily targeting kids. These are people who want to wrap themselves in the cross and in Jesus, and yet want to cut food from kids. This is what we're up against. And we have so many, Republicans who do not have the guts in this moment to stand up. And Democrats have to be louder, and we have to fight harder. Don't get me wrong on that point. But we have to also be clear about the math. Republicans have a majority in the House and in the Senate, and all it would take is 3 Republicans in the Senate to stand up and say no. And one of those quote-unquote moderate Republicans is right in the Philadelphia suburbs, Brian Fitzpatrick, who comes and says he's a moderate, and then goes to D.C. and votes with Donald Trump 98% of the time.
We're talking with Malcolm Kenyatta. He, of course, the vice chair of the Democratic National Committee. I'm glad you brought up that bill, which, of course, has been passed by the House and now is in the Senate. If the Senate passes it, Donald Trump signs it. Food assistance could be cut by over $260 billion. At the least, 10 million people could be without health insurance. The national deficit could increase by as much as $2.8 trillion over the next decade, all while giving tax breaks to billionaires. So we're focused on what's happening in Iran. But right here in America, all it takes is the Senate to pass this thing. They say they're trying to pass it by July 4th. And a whole lot of people could be in deep trouble here in America if that legislation passes.
You know, and we should be clear, you know, sometimes, you know, Solomon, when I or others say, you know, Donald Trump is doing what he's doing in Iran as a distraction, it does not mean that he doesn't have, you know, clear, maniacal, ego-driven maybe reasons for doing that. But a part of it is a distraction to get people not focused on the fact that every single day on nearly every metric, Donald Trump has made our lives worse. And I want people to hear me on this. I know I'm a Democrat, so it's easy to tune me out if you're an independent or a Republican. But my issue with Donald Trump is not I don't like his hair, you know, or he can't walk up the damn steps. My issue with him is that everything he committed to folks about was a lie. And so if you voted for Donald Trump, giving him the benefit of the doubt, he lied to you over and over again. He lied to you. And I don't think it's fair. And I don't think it's right to ask the poorest Americans, because that's who would be hit the worst by this tax bill, not only because of the reduction in services, but literally if you make under $150,000 a year, Donald Trump's tax bill is going to raise your taxes by upwards of $6,000 a year. Raise your taxes. The poorest people are going to see their taxes increase the most, while the richest people are going to see their taxes cut the most. Is that just fair? Like, just think about that. Is that right? Does that make your life better to pay $6,000 more to lose your health care and to say to your kids, sorry, we might not be able to eat today? Does that make your life better? No. And Donald Trump wants us distracted with, you know, DEI or, you know, look over there, this person doesn't look like you, or they love different people than you love. And we're all distracted on this while he is picking our pockets, actively picking our pockets. And we're going to be loud about this, and we're going to continue to talk about this. And now I'm happy to say, you know, this was not history I wanted to make, but I'm the first DNC officer to win election twice. So here we are. So, but now that chapter is behind us, you know, we should be laser focused on what Donald Trump is trying to do to get us in a war that nobody wants, and to put all of us in a position where we have less money in our pockets, where we're less safe, and we're paying more for all the things that we need, like food and gas.
All right. As DNC Chair Malcolm Kenyatta, and again, congratulations on your election as DNC Vice Chair. We certainly appreciate you, and thank you so much.
This is the Week on WURD.
Why is WURD important to the community?
Thank you for asking.
Let me count the ways.
And it's one of the most important radio stations in the country.
WURD has always been a platform for Black people in Philadelphia. We're one of the only Black-owned talk radio stations in the country. We're one of 4 in the nation.
You know, a lot of what's going on in the world today, I think, is a result of people feeling like they don't have a voice.
Without WURD, we wouldn't have such educated, loving, caring people of color who really are interested in what's going on in neighborhoods around the city.
WURD creates such a sense of community in the Black community here in Philadelphia.
It amplifies the voices that are mostly marginalized.
It allows you to speak and be heard and to create your own narrative, your own story. It's a place where we can share our thoughts, our ideas, our dreams. You control who and what you say about yourself.
Every community needs a hub.
We are giving voice to the community, and without the community, there will be no WURD. We are one and the same, and it is not a game. WURD.
This is the Week on WURD, a podcast highlighting the top conversations on WURD Radio. Make sure you look for and follow WURD Radio on social media. Up next, Megan Piphus, a 4-time Emmy-winning producer and nationally recognized ventriloquist, stopped by the Midday Break Room with Tiffany Bacon. And welcome back to the Midday Break Room here on WURD. I'm Tiffany Bacon, and our water cooler question of the day is, are you living a regret-less purpose-filled life. My next guest seems to be doing just that. She is an actress, singer, and ventriloquist. She is a 4-time Emmy-winning producer and artist who began performing at age 10 and gained national recognition as a ventriloquist on the Oprah Winfrey Show. On what was this now? On the Oprah Winfrey Show?
Yeah, I was 16 years old, and she had an online competition that was called The World's Smartest and Most Talented Kids, and you could upload your video. So this was like at the advent of YouTube too. So it was like almost like uploading to Oprah's version of YouTube. Wow. And I submitted my VHS tape that we converted and put it online.
Oh my goodness. She said VHS tape. So we are definitely going back. And our guest today has played the role of Gabrielle on the legendary children's show Sesame Street since 2020. Megan Piphus, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you so much. I hope I said your name correctly. Please correct me if I am wrong. I want to make sure I said that right.
Yeah, Megan Piphus.
All right, Megan Piphus, thank you so much for joining us today. I am so interested in your career. In fact, our jumping off point is going to be from this clip. So there's a clip of you on the rebooted Apollo in 2023. Steve Harvey was the host. We're just going to play a clip of this, and then we're going to talk about it and your career. So let's take a look.
That was 2017.
That's good. That's the same thing. How you doing?
Very good, Steve.
Okay. And how long have you been doing this?
We've been doing it for 15 years.
I'm going to just talk to you the rest of the time. The two dummies is throwing me off a little bit. I don't really know how to talk to no dummies.
All right. And so thank you for correcting me. 2017. I said 2023, but that was back in 2017 in the reboot of the Apollo. And I play that clip because, and I know that we couldn't see the video on this, but Steve Harvey's reaction, and they pan to the audience and some of their reactions to you holding these two awesome puppets and you throwing your voice to the puppets. They're like, what is this? So talk about being a ventriloquist and receiving side eyes from people when you tell them this is what you do.
Oh, that was the most terrifying moment of my life. You know, the Apollo Theater Harlem audience is ruthless. And I come out there with two puppets ready to do a puppet show on the Apollo Theater. So I felt like I had some work to do as soon as the performance started. But I just treated it like any other performance, showing up to local church, local school. I usually get a little bit of side eye when I pull out puppets, but when I start talking with them and show that they're just like us, and I'm just imitating life through them.
That's pretty awesome. I'm very curious about how you started in your journey as a ventriloquist. Before we even get to the sing, the song we were playing coming back from commercial break is your newest song. So we're going to get into that. But how did you get into being a ventriloquist?
Yeah, so there was a lady at my church. I'm a preacher's kid. There's a lady who taught Vacation Bible School, and she would use puppets to teach lessons. And so she found this conference where she could learn and get better in the skill of puppetry for teaching in Christian settings. And so she got a group of kids to go with her because she realized there were puppet teams that went from churches together and they performed together. And so we all assembled and went to this conference, and in the evenings they had performances. And there were these women ventriloquists that would sing with their puppets and tell stories. And I had never seen anything like it. I mean, I saw Sherry Lewis, but she was so good, I didn't know she was a ventriloquist until much later. And so I was astonished, immediately knew I wanted to learn. And so I was there to do kind of stage puppetry, not specifically ventriloquism. So I went home and I told my mom that I wanted to learn, and she helped me find tapes at the library on how to do ventriloquism. And we found a puppet from the toy store. And I sat in front of the TV with the mirror and practiced over and over. And within 2 weeks, I was performing for my friends at school.
Wow. I love it. And I have to say, another reason why I wanted to play the clip from the Apollo, because when you don't often hear about folks, especially our folks in this career, having this interest and having some success, you made your way to Sesame Street. And if you're of a certain age, you grew up with Sesame, a certain age and younger, you grew up with Sesame Street. So the Muppet Show was my thing as a kid. I love Jim Henson. But when you think about puppets, and now he has respect, because we've seen and heard about how little respect he had back in the day, just trying to get out there and do his thing. But you don't hear about us Black folks in that space. Has that been difficult for you? Has anyone not taken you seriously because you do this? And if that's the case, how did you overcome that?
Oh, that's been the majority of my career. There were people from a very young age that were like, you should really be focusing on school. I was doing really well in school. I graduated valedictorian in my high school class. So, there were people like, focus on, your academics. And I also did music. They were like, you can sing without the puppets. But I realized there's a special magic and spark that comes from doing puppetry. The ability to bring something to life that has no life is almost like creating hope. You're sparking the imagination. And that's a powerful thing to do, to be able to do with children, to spark their imagination. Play is the love language of kids. So you're able to enter their world of play. And for adults, you're able to remind them of the imagination they had as a child. So I've been told to quit a million times and I didn't listen.
Thank God. Thank God. Like I was mentioning earlier, we are a new show here at WURD, and we have the water cooler conversation each day. And the water cooler topic is, or question rather, is, are you living a regret-less, purpose-filled life? What would be your answer to that question?
I am definitely living a purpose-filled life and grateful to be able to live this life. There are many years where I dreamed of being able to live in my purpose. And I remember going to the water cooler in the break room of the offices that I was working in and realizing that I wasn't taking a risk on myself. And after I had my first son, I realized I wanted to change that. I didn't want to tell him to dream for himself when I myself was not living in purpose. I knew my purpose was to use the gifts I have in the creative arts to inspire kids and their parents. And I wasn't doing that because I was afraid. And so I decided that I would work as hard as I could. I would get up early in the morning and stay up late at night to write and practice until the opportunity came along for me to have that moment to decide I'm going to live a purpose-filled life.
That's awesome. That is really, really great to hear. And to be in a non-traditional career, just saying, hey, I'm not going to listen to what everybody says, and I think a lot of us in the creative and performing arts have had that well-meaning parent or person in their life that said, baby, you just going to get you a good job with some benefits and don't worry about this other stuff. It's like, I think it's empowering to them when you don't listen and you succeed and you're able to say, I love what I do and I am in some ways helpful to other people with what I'm doing. Talk about being on Sesame Street, the behind the scenes. Talk about how you landed that gig and what it was like to be on the show.
It's absolutely incredible to be on the show. I put it on my dream board just as an aspiration for the level of puppetry that I wanted to do, and how clean and crisp and imaginative I want it to be, but I didn't actually realize that I would have the opportunity to be on the show. So I sent, and we were talking about Jim Henson, I sent an audition tape to the Jim Henson Company back in 2017. And when I went on their website, it clearly said, we are not accepting auditions. But they still had their address up, so I sent it anyway. And I figured it was probably in the trash somewhere. But in 2020, I got an email from one of the producers and performers on Sesame Street. His name's Matt Vogel. He plays Big Bird and Kermit the Frog. And he said, hey, because of the pandemic, we stopped production. And I've had time to go through old submissions. And I have access to the auditions at the Jim Henson Company and came across your packet. By your letter, I don't even remember what I put in the letter. By your letter, it seems like you would be interested in Sesame Street. Would you be willing to learn our style of puppetry? And not only were they welcomed me into their mentorship program, but also giving me the opportunity to learn from them. So I immediately said yes. I should have said no because I was 6 weeks pregnant in a global pandemic, but I decided I was going to take the chance anyway. And we had Zoom sessions. And within 3 months, I had the opportunity to audition for the role of Gabrielle. And my first role with her was on the CNN town hall on racism in response to the George Floyd protest.
Wow.
And so the Muppets got on with families, and they got to ask questions to the journalists and different experts on the situation to understand what was going on. So that was incredibly rewarding. And since then, I've had so many wonderful moments with Gabrielle. Being on Sesame Street is like walking into your childhood because you can touch and feel the set. You can sit on the 1, 2, 3 steps. You can go inside, hook for store. You can hug Elmo. And most people cry a little when they hug their favorite Muppet. So my favorite part is watching people come into the set for the first time because you can see them enter their childhood. So that's super special.
I absolutely love it. I'm tearing up a little bit because I love Elmo and I love Sesame Street. I have loved Sesame Street since I was a child. And how poignant it is that you are the first full-time Black puppeteer at Sesame Street. And then your entrance is during 2020, during the George Floyd protests, during all of this stuff. I want to hear from you about what that meant to you or means to you as a Black woman, and talk about some of the amazing things you're doing for young women, including your upcoming album, which will be released on July 11th. But we have to take a break. If you're just tuning in, this is the Midday Break Room here at WURD. I'm Tiffany Bacon in conversation with Megan Piphus. Today's water cooler question: are you living a regret-less, purpose-filled life? Here's an example of someone who is. You and I, the audience, you and I will talk about that in a bit. But when we come back, more conversation with Megan Piphus after this. And welcome back to the Midday Break Room on WURD. I'm Tiffany Bacon, and we are currently in conversation with actress, singer, and ventriloquist Megan Piphus, who is the first full-time puppeteer, Black puppeteer on Sesame Street. And we have been talking about our water cooler topic of the day, which is, are you living a regret-less, purpose-filled life? She already identified that she is, and you have stepped into some shoes that help young people. I mean, we just glean so much love and fun and education from Sesame Street. And now you have stepped out to do some other work to assist young girls. You're working with Keke Palmer's nonprofit. Tell us about that.
Yes, I'm the first Black woman puppeteer on Sesame Street.
Black woman puppeteer. Yeah,
there are some incredible Black puppeteers that came before me that have paved the way. But now I have the opportunity to open doors for other young girls of color. I'm working with Saving Our Daughters, who's founded by Kurt and Debbie Benjamin and Keke Palmer. And they support girls and mentor them in the arts. And they also do anti-bullying initiatives and initiatives that promote their self-esteem. So I partnered my album Cinderella Sweep with Saving Our Daughters, and they auditioned girls from several of their partner schools, and the girls came to the studio and recorded as a choir. And for many of the girls, it was their first time in a recording studio. Nice. So they came in with so much joy and excitement and readiness to learn. They were able to learn what a metronome is, what a recording engineer is, what a certified record is. So many wonderful parts of the entertainment industry they were exposed to and doing the album. But we're so excited. They're on 5 of the tracks, and we recorded in 3 cities, a total of 53 girls on the album. We also recorded with the Soul Children Chicago legendary gospel choir out of Chicago. So even more kids there. There was probably 40 in Chicago that we recorded with. So it's been an incredible experience to be able to provide recording opportunities for kids that were just like me about 20 years ago.
Right. Oh, that is awesome. And the album is released when? Tell us a little bit more so we can make sure we get it.
The album is coming out July 11th. We have 2 songs out now, A New Cinderella and ABCs of Me, which goes through all of the professions A to Z that you can be.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And how joyful is it for you to, on a daily basis, dip into your childhood, dip into your youth center? Like, do you think that's what keeps you energetic, positive, youthful yourself?
Yeah, there's not a day that goes by where I'm not grateful to be able to wake up and do this as a living. And I'm especially grateful to be able to do this in front of my kids and with my kids. Many of my songs and scripts come from me writing just in their room and playing with them. So it's just pure joy.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I absolutely love it. And I had to, I was speaking with my producer, Niall. I was like, growing up, the only Black ventriloquist I saw, and I couldn't remember his name when I was talking to my producer. And I was like, I remember seeing one gentleman, and his name was Willie Tyler and Lester.
Yes.
I had to look it up because I'm like, I remember seeing him on game shows and like Star Search and stuff like that. So I think this is just amazing being a woman in the field, to create something that involves other young girls so that they can participate in recording. I think this is awesome. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No, I'm grateful, especially as equity initiatives are being cut back around the nation. Yeah. We're able to still create something for our community.
Absolutely. And right before the break, I asked you the question about being a Black woman working on Sesame Street during the time of the protests in 2020, especially after the George Floyd incident. What did that mean to you specifically as a Black woman?
Yeah, I feel like it's our duty and our service to educate our children. And so that was an opportunity to teach them through the lens of a little Black girl, and to communicate in terms that they would understand. And so it was incredibly purpose-filled for me to be able to respond in that moment and be of service.
Yeah, I love that. So what is I'm a little lost on the updates on Sesame Street. I know that HBO said no thanks, but I heard that Netflix is picking it up. So where are we with that now?
Yeah, and the next season will be streamed on Netflix and still on PBS Kids.
Fabulous. So the legacy continues. And I have to say, I did not know until I watched the documentary, and I cannot remember the name. Please forgive me, y'all, for not remembering things. I'm going to blame it on age. I shouldn't. No excuses. I'm trying to live a life of no excuses, but for real. The fog in the brain. But the documentary that I saw about Sesame Street, talking about its origins, and I didn't know until that documentary that the street of Sesame Street is really modeled after Harlem. Yeah. And so when you think about this was originally put together, targeted for us, Black kids, brown kids in the inner city, it just adds a different level. Maybe that's why some people have an issue with it, but it adds just a different level of respect for me. Yes. How does that feel for you, knowing that history, knowing its origins, and knowing that you're a part of it now?
It warms my soul because that's the roots of why I perform. I didn't start off performing on large stages. I was going to daycares and elementary school events in my neighborhood, which was predominantly Black, and I was creating characters that would resonate with the kids in my community. And so it's great to work with an organization that was doing just the same, of building a street in a community that's based on children that need that support and foundational preschool education. And so it's just heartwarming, because that's exactly what my mission and purpose was to serve the kids in my community that just happen to look like me.
I know that's right. Do you know of any national organizations that parents who are watching right now, or any caregivers of young kids who are listening to this, who are watching you right now, who may be interested in puppeteering, who may be interested in ventriloquism?
Yeah, so I recommend just looking online. So that is the benefit of this day and age. You can go on YouTube and you can watch all kinds of wonderful puppetry. There's all kinds of styles of puppetry. There's shadow puppets, there's hand puppets, there's walk around puppets like Barney. So I would just say, first, Google. You can look at Sesame Street. You can look at the Muppets. You can look at theater puppetry shows and find what type kind of speaks to you, and then just keep digging. And honestly, you can reach out to a lot. One thing I've noticed, that puppeteers are very friendly and very willing to teach. And so I would even recommend reaching out to a puppeteer and saying, hey, how did you get started? Or do you have any recommendations on how I can learn this? Because if they're not able to help, they'll most likely give you a referral.
There you go. And I love that. Keep the community. I love this. Yes. How can people follow you and keep up with all that you're doing? And of course, to pick up the album when it's released on July 11th.
Yes, the album will be streamed on all platforms. You can find it on Apple, Amazon, Tidal, Spotify, YouTube, all of it. But you can keep up with me through my name. I'm on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook under Megan Piphus.
All right. And Piphus is spelled Piphus if you're looking her up right now. Megan, thank you so much for joining us on the Midday Break Room today. I greatly appreciate you.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
You're listening to The Week on WURD. Represent your favorite station in style. Look for Afrocentric tees, hoodies, tumblers, notebooks, mugs, and more. Just click the shop tab at wordradio.com. Show the world that you're all about Black Talk Media.
You gotta look good.
This is the Week on WURD podcast. To learn more about our programming, visit wordradio.com. Our last conversation for this episode features Dr. Etta Fields Black, professor and director at Carnegie Mellon University's Dietrich College of Humanities and Social Sciences, joins Dr. James Peterson on Evening Words.
Very excited to welcome to the program Dr. Etta Fields Black, a professor in the Department of History and the director of the Dietrich College Humanities Center at Carnegie Mellon University. Dr. Fields Black's research is the transnational history of West African rice farmers, peasant farmers in pre-colonial Upper Guinea coast, and enslaved laborers on rice plantations in the antebellum South Carolina and the Georgia Low Country. Here to discuss her teachings at Carnegie Mellon, as well as her 2024 book release, Combahee, Harriet Tubman, the Combahee River Raid and Black Freedom During the Civil War. Dr. Etta Fields Black, welcome to Evening Words.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here.
Thank you for joining us. So we're just having a little bit of debate here on Evening Words about the 1964 Civil Rights Act. And I want to ask you to weigh in on it. So obviously it's July 1st. It is now 61 years of the Civil Rights Act. Mm-hmm. And we've been kind of going back and trying to analyze the pros and cons of the Civil Rights Act. And I've been encouraging our listeners to speak with some of the elders in their family and their communities, especially those elders who lived in the South, to have a kind of better understanding of what the conditions were, because there are some Black folks who are like, hey, the Civil Rights Act was a mistake, or the Civil Rights Act, we didn't need it. And I feel like that's a little bit disconnected from history. As a historian, can you connect us back to our historical roots here, please, Dr. Fields Black?
I can try. So I think that the 1964 Civil Rights Act for Black people who were in the South, okay, I'm going to take this back to a family level.
That's good.
I am from the South. I was born and raised in Miami, Florida. The great-granddaughter of Bahamian immigrants. My mother's family immigrated in the turn of the 20th century, so the early 1900s. My grandmother was born in Miami, but her parents came when they were a young married couple before they had children. My father's family is from South Carolina, and Dad was born in Green Pond, South Carolina. And then his parents, he's the last of the children born in Green Pond in the country. And then
the Low Country of South Carolina, beautiful.
In the Low Country,
beautiful area of the country.
The Low Country.
Beautiful area, yeah.
Not very far from where the Combahee River raid took place. So after he's born, his parents go to Charleston, then they go to Miami. And when you think about just using education as an example, my grandmother, born in 1909, she and her brother were the first of their siblings to be able to go to high school in Miami, right? There were no high schools for Black students for her older brothers and sisters. So they had to leave home in eighth grade.
Wow.
To go to Jacksonville, Florida, or to Atlanta to go to high school.
My.
Those are the kinds of things we have to remember. The 1964 Civil Rights Bill was not perfect.
Of course not.
And so much of the work is still remaining to be done. It's not something that we should sit back and allow to be dismantled. Because we strive to continue moving forward and not go back.
Let's talk a little bit about the book. It's still a new book to me, about the Combahee River Raid for folks. And it is I've not had a chance to read all of it. I've read some of it. It's a very academic book. It's deep research, extremely well researched. Congratulations on the great work. For folks who have not heard of this particular piece of Harriet Tubman's history, tell them what the Combahee River Raid was and why it's important in our history.
Yeah, so some would know that Harriet Tubman came down to Beaufort, South Carolina during the Civil War to serve as a spy for the U.S. government, the U.S. Army. And she recruited, trained, she's the first woman to lead men in battle, a group of 8 or 9 spies, scouts, and pilots who infiltrated Confederate territory in 1863 and sort of laid the foundation, gathering espionage, removing torpedoes, diffusing torpedoes, opening up the Combahee River so that on June 2nd, the U.S. Army could come up the river from Beaufort, South Carolina, in 3 armed boats and raid 7 rice plantations, burning everything to the ground, the plantation homes, the barns full of rice, the stables, the smokehouses, the kitchens, all of these outbuildings that made up a plantation in the South. They opened the floodgates in the irrigation system and flooded the rice fields with salt water, killing the crop that was growing in them. They burned a pontoon bridge that was over the Combahee River and cut the Confederate supply line from the rice that was grown on these plantations that the Confederacy was exporting, as well as using it to provision their troops and their civilians. And lastly, 756 people liberated themselves. Okay. This was the largest slave revolt in U.S. history, I argue, in Combahee. and the second largest in the history of the New World, only to the Haitian Revolution, largest and most successful. And it's led by Harriet Tubman, her ring of spies, scouts, and pilots who were formerly enslaved. The soldiers, the majority of the soldiers were Black from the 2nd South Carolina Volunteers, commanded by Colonel James Montgomery, who was one of John Brown's men, and the 3rd Rhode Island Heavy Artillery, a battery of troops who I like to say like to blow things up, were there to lend their hands as well. So it's a story that we all really ought to know, and just the Civil War is the least known aspect of Harriet Tubman's life.
Is it true that they didn't even properly compensate Harriet Tubman for her time serving as a spy and a tracker and a scout in the U.S. Army?
She was never paid. She was given a small amount of Secret Service money, and she used it because she had to pay people for information. Sometimes she also used a small amount of money that she got to build a wash house in downtown Beaufort, because she wanted to teach and facilitate some of the freedom-seeking women to become laundresses so that they could wash clothes and help their families, right? So that they were contributing to the family income and taking some of the stress off their husbands and also off of the government if these women could be more independent. So she used the little money she had to build this wash house. Tubman applies for a pension, but she applies for a pension as a widow. Her second husband was a Civil War veteran. He died before she did. She applied for a pension as his widow and received it. And then there were several acts of Congress that were written to try to compensate her, because she was pensioned for her husband's military service, not her service, right? Right. So then these acts of Congress were written so that she could get compensated for her own service. And finally, in the 1890s, her pension is raised, but it's only for her work as a nurse, never for her work as a spy and a scout. She was never pensioned for that work.
I feel like the United States federal government needs to pay the Harriet Tubman estate the balance of that plus interest.
Yes.
Right? Is that unreasonable? Is that a radical thing to?
That's not a radical thing at all.
so Dr. Fields Black, I mean, part of your work expands our understanding of Harriet Tubman as a figure, right? She gets flattened out in history sometimes.
Yes.
Right. As someone, they talk a lot about her being in Maryland or in Philadelphia, not so much about her being in South Carolina or about her service in what's still one of the most violent and excruciating wars in this nation's history. Your research, I think, helps us get a better sense of like the mindset of Harriet Tubman, how much of a visionary she was, how tactically intelligent she was. Talk a little bit about that so folks can get a more fleshed out sense of who Harriet Tubman was.
Yeah, well, she was a military strategist, and she had been operating in enemy territory and fearlessly for years, more than a dozen years before the Civil War. She also knew how to read the landscape and how to survive on
She was a
land.
cartographer. She was like a photographic cartographer, if that makes sense, right?
It does, in reading the stars, and reading the landscape, and not just the landscape in the Maryland Eastern Shore, but she could have been on the moon and she could figure out how to survive. And this is how she's able to go from the Maryland Eastern Shore down to South Carolina. There were some similarities in the environment, but a lot of differences. It was just the skills that she had to read that landscape and figure out how to survive. And not to mention that she was leading desperate freedom seekers of all ages in all stages of physical health. And the one thing that, they had in common, they were all afraid, extremely afraid. They were all desperate to be free. Some were family members, some were community members. Honestly, I think dealing with her family members might have been harder than dealing with some other folks. The family they really tried to put her through her paces a couple times, but she was able to lead these people, keep everybody safe so that she didn't lose anybody. And this is in the frozen winters on the Chesapeake, which it's not quite Philly, it's not quite Pittsburgh, but it's cold.
Especially at nighttime.
At nighttime, when you don't have protective clothing, when you're not wearing shoes, when you have to cross icy water, it was cold. And, they're walking at night and resting during the day. And she would also go out and forage. So there was a lot of exposure, yet she was able to keep people safe.
Amazing. I have so many more questions about Cone B, but I want to make sure that it's the teaching. So we got to talk about some of your teaching. I hope you have the summer off, Dr. Fields Black. I hope you have the summer off, but talk to us a little bit about what are some of the classes that you teach at Carnegie Mellon University.
Yeah, so at Carnegie Mellon, I teach a 2-semester survey of African history, the pre-colonial period in one semester, and then the modern period in the next. I teach a West Africa through film class, a class on the Middle Passage. And a class on comparative slavery. So in that class, I'm looking at the old world and the new. So Africa, the Islamic world, and then the new world.
Dr. Fields Black, I don't know if you follow the Ibrahim Traore news, but his is a name that comes up quite a bit here on Evening Words. He has become a popular leader. He's the leader of Burkina Faso, but he's become a popular figure in the Black American and the Black diasporic imagination. To the extent that you're aware of him, talk a little bit about every once in a while figures like this emerge. A lot of times out of West Africa, but every once in a while figures like this emerge off the continent. They just strike a certain chord throughout the diaspora. What's your sense of Mr. Traore in terms of his rise over the last couple of years?
I think that there's a desire for nationalism. There's a desire for unity among Black people on the continent, and particularly in the diaspora. We're constantly wanting to reconnect. We're constantly wanting to go back, whether it's actually physically, but often it's politically, it's spiritually, it's culturally. I think President Ibrahim Traore strikes a chord because he's trying to be independent. He's trying to throw off the neo-colonial
the neo-colonial shackles?
Right. Neo-colonial shackles. Thank you. That even though Burkina Faso is independent and has been independent, and, the continent is independent, those economic, those political, those military shackles are still there. And I think that we in the diaspora, we really admire that, right? We can get with that. We got some shackles we want to throw off too. So we're looking for a hero, right? We really are.
Pronounce his last name for me one more time, President Traore, you said? Traore. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I got it. Thank you for that. I want to get the names right. And again, it's rare that we see this, but it's remarkable how his leadership style, how he presents, and people are looking for a hero, right? People are looking for a Black diasporic hero, and President Traore seems to fit that particular bill. We only have a couple of minutes left. I don't want to leave out the Dietrich Humanities Center. You're the director of this center. Talk to us a little bit about the mission of the center.
So this is a center that is devoted to faculty and graduate student research, research on human-centered creating human-centered solutions to today's most pressing problems, and people who are looking at that human perspective, which is so important. And so much of our world is global and it's increasingly technological. And so even in technology, we can't forget about the human aspects of who's using that technology and how it's impacting the world. And so that's what we focus on in Carnegie.
I hear some AI in the background of what you're saying. I mean, I'm a believer that human problems need human solutions. I'm a big believer in that. But I hear AI is like the elephant in the room of your conversation, Dr. Fields-Black.
Yeah, and there's a whole lot of AI here at Carnegie Mellon. And so as these tools are created, right? They're so often created in a vacuum. But they're not implemented in a vacuum. They're implemented on people and on communities. And so we need to know about those people and about those communities. And then we need to think about how technology is impacting them.
Dr. Etta Fields-Black, thank you so much for taking time out of your summer schedule, no less, to join us here for the Tuesday teaching on Evening Words. Your work is amazing. I appreciate you sharing some insights from it with our listeners today. Hopefully you'll come back on sometime. We can talk more about your work, go back and maybe talk a little bit more about the book and the great things you're doing at Carnegie Mellon University.
You're listening to The Week on Word.
Why is WURD important to the community?
WURD actually literally saved me from mainstream media. WURD is a Black gem. WURD is just unbelievable with the information that I have learned.
When we sit there and we think about how important WURD is, that alone should make us give.
Back in the day when Churchy Woods was on, we had no idea that we needed to support the radio station like we know now.
Listeners, we gotta save it. We gotta save our WURD radio.
Like, if it wasn't for Black media, you wouldn't know who a Music Soul Child is.
Visit WURDradio.com/support. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of The Week on Word. Let's stay connected. Sign up for our newsletter and listen to us online at WURDradio.com and on the WURD Radio app.